Shalom, everybody. This is Tony Robinson, and I want to talk to you about learning how to outline. I've had a few people ask me about how to outline, and this is something that I encourage greatly. It's part of all of my lesson plans that I'm doing for the 3-year Torah portion, and there's a lot to be gained from it. So I'd like to talk to you about that. Let's start with prayer. Father, in the mighty name of Yeshua, we just thank you for your goodness, your kindness, your love, and your mercy. We ask that you would open our eyes that we may behold wondrous things from your Torah. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is what is an outline. So let's just talk about kind of define an outline. I've defined it as a high-level roadmap of an essay, research paper, book, project, or presentation. Okay, it's a high-level roadmap. It consists of brief titles, very brief titles, organized by numbers and letters that show the order of the subjects, plots, ideas, topics, themes, ideas, and how they're arranged in the overall work. Okay, so it's basically a roadmap of all the different topics given in order that they're going to be presented in. So it helps whoever the presenter is or the speaker is, it helps them to be able to, number one, organize their thoughts, and number two, if they're giving a presentation, it helps them to organize how they're going to progress through the presentation. They're arranged in such a way as to give you an overall bird's eye view of how each section and an entire work is organized. Okay, all right. So, and we're gonna actually we'll look at it right now. It may sound kind of esoteric because I'm just talking, but who uses outlines and why are they used? It's a tool used by writers and presenters to help them organize how they will present information in such a manner that the reader or the listener can follow along. Okay, so I use it all the time. If I'm going to do a presentation, if I'm going to do a teaching or what have you, I start off with just kind of a general outline. It'll be, let's say I have a teaching, it may be 5 major points that I want to make. And so I'll have those 5 major points, and then as I prepare my slides for the teaching, I will expand those 5 points, okay? All right, so so you may be asking, after that definition, you may be asking, well, why are we studying outlining as far as reading or studying the Bible, okay? Because you may think to yourself, well, I'm not about to give a presentation. I'm not about to present something to anyone, so what do I need to outline, okay? So I'm gonna answer that question for you. Okay, the first thing I want to say is that the Bible is probably, well, it's not probably, it is one of the most highly organized pieces of literature ever written. Okay, it is highly organized. Okay, and if any of you have been on our website, and if you've studied any of our lessons on the chiastic nature of the Bible, how it's written in thematic patterns, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, just look at some of our Torah lessons and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But the Bible is very organized, okay? So even though I'm not teaching outlining as a tool for you as a presenter, let's say, you know, for you to how to put a presentation together. So even though we're not using it as an outline, not using outlining to write or present anything, we can use the process of outlining to help us understand the Bible. Okay, we can still use outlining as a tool. And it's a great tool to help us understand the Bible because, as I said before, the Bible is organized thematically. It's organized chronologically for the most part, but the Bible is also written in thematic order. And again, as I said, if you get into some of our Torah lessons, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about because I talk about themes in all of my Torah lessons, whether it's the 1-year cycle or the 3-year cycle. But I believe that the Bible is the quintessential document that lends itself to outlining because of its dependence on themes and the development of those themes. Okay, and again, we're going to be talking about we're going to be using the word themes or topics or subjects quite often in this teaching here. So instead of using outlining to organize a story, as if you were going to either do a presentation or if you were going to write a story, let's say, we're going to kind of do some reverse engineering, and we're going to take something that's already written, i.e. the Bible, or a biblical narrative, and we're going to outline it in order to better understand the story. Okay, so we're reverse engineering. Okay, because normally outlining is a tool used to help organize someone's thought who's either going to be giving a presentation or writing a story. And so we're going to do it the opposite way. We're going to reverse engineer. We're going to take something that's already written, and what we're going to do is we're going to analyze it for those major topics and those major themes, and then we're going to write them down. And that's going to help us better understand the biblical stories that we read. Okay? So by way of example, I'm going to use the story of Jacob, the story of Jacob's life, which begins, let me grab my Bible here, which is in Genesis chapter 28. So I'm going to turn over there. And Genesis 28. Okay, so let's just play a little game here. Let's suppose that Jacob wanted to write a brief history of his lifetime outside of the Promised Land. Okay, and that's basically from Genesis 28 to Genesis 32. Supposing he wanted to write a brief history. So let's pretend as if we didn't have Genesis 28 through 32. Moses had not written that, and let's say that Jacob wanted to write a brief biography, let's say, of what happened in his life in those chapters. Okay, so if he wanted to do that, if he wanted to write this, what he would need to do is he would need to review the history. Okay, he needs to sit back and just kind of think about those events that happened early in his life, and he'd review the history, and he'd write down some thoughts of the main events he wants to talk about. Okay, so again, when you're starting off with an outline, you start off with the major points that you want to hit. Okay, and so this is going to become evident as we do this. Now, what he would do is he'd think about, okay, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that event, this event, that event. And so what he could do is he could capture those thoughts in an outline. Okay, so he could sit down with his scroll and his quill, and he could capture those. Those thoughts in an outline. So let's say that he decided his story would cover the following topics. Okay, let's say his story. He said, okay, I'm going to talk about my journey to Padan Aram, and my journey to Padan Aram, and my departure from Padan Aram. I want to talk about meeting and marrying my wives. I want to talk about building my family and then building the family business. Okay, so those will be those. So, for example, those are four major topics that are covered in Genesis 28 through 32. Okay, and he could use these four topics as his outline. Okay, his journey to and from Padan Aram, meeting and marrying his wives, building his family, and building the family business. Those kind of capture in general what happened. Okay, so how to organize your main topics. Your main points or your major topics, like the four we just talked about. The major topics of your outline are given Roman numerals, usually given Roman numerals, and ranked according to order. So, for instance, Roman numeral 1 is your first major topic. Roman numeral 2 is your second major topic. Roman numeral 3 is your third, and so forth. Okay, so you have Roman numeral 8, 9, and 10. and so forth. So each of your major topics is going to be given a Roman numeral. So then, Jacob could organize his thoughts using the following starting point as an outline. Roman numeral 1 can be his departure from Padan Aram. Roman numeral 2 could be his marriage to Laban's daughters. Roman numeral 3 could be building his family. And then Roman numeral 4 could be building his family business. Okay, it could be building his family business. Now, what he's going to do, what Jacob would do, is he would use these 4 major topics to guide him through writing his history. So these are just the major topics. The next point would be to fill in the details on these major topics. And of course, I'm sorry, I forgot. Part 5 is his return to the land. Okay, so that would comprise Genesis 28 through 32. So this will be Jacob's main outline of his history. And so this gives him just a basic starting point. Now he knows everything he wants to talk about. He knows the order that he wants to talk about. So the remainder of his task is just to go in and fill in those details. So now, obviously, if we go back and look at that, obviously those are just the major subjects that he wants to talk about. But within each one of these topics, Roman numeral 1 through 5, there's a lot of information. So, for instance, there was a significant amount of information in Roman numeral 2, Jacob's marriage to Laban's daughters. Okay, there was a lot of information there. So, once he begins to write out the story, what he can do is he can think about how each main point can be broken down into further subtopics. Okay, so in other words, when it comes to Jacob wanting to talk about the marriage to his wives, he can sit back and he can think, now, what all do I want to tell about that? And he can start thinking about his history and then breaking that down. And so normally those subtopics of your major Roman numerals, your major topics, those are usually given letters such as A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so for example, part 2 in Jacob's outline could be outlined as follows. So you got part 2, Roman numeral 2, Jacob's marriage to Laban's daughters. And then A, the first thing that he may want to talk about in his history is when he met Rachel at the well. Okay, so he could start off there, and then part B is he could talk about his marriage to Rachel and Leah. Okay, and so now what you see is that as we begin to fill in the details of the outline, it becomes a great tool or a guide to help us plan our story. Okay, so then you can more easily write the story, or if you're doing a presentation, you can more easily develop your presentation. And the same thing could be done for parts 1, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, you take each major topic and you think, okay, how am I going to break down this major topic into smaller topics that I want to deal with? So as you can see, the outline it would just be an awesome way, a great way for Jacob to map out the major portions of the history that he wants to tell. And so then after completing the outline, he'd have a roadmap. He'd have a roadmap for how to tell his complete history. Okay, and it would make the job a lot easier. Okay, so let's talk about how to further organize the subtopics. I mean, we've already talked about the major subjects. Now let's talk about organizing the subtopics. We can continue to break down any subtopic. Okay, so let's go back. You saw how we started off with our major Roman numeral 2, Jacob's marriage to Laban's daughters, but then we broke it down into 2 other subtopics: meeting Rachel at the well and his marriage to Rachel and Leah. Well, we can break those 2 subtopics, A and B, down further also. Okay, so parts 2A and 2B could be further developed as follows. So Jacob's marriage to Laban's daughters is Roman numeral 2, and then, as I said, normally you go from a number to a letter. So part A is his arrival in Padan Aram, And now he wants to look at that arrival in Padan Aram, and he wants to break it down further. So now we switch back to numbers again. But instead of using Roman numerals, we'll write the numbers in a different kind of way. So you always, as you go from topic to subtopic to subtopic to subtopic, you're going to switch from numbers to letters. It doesn't make any difference how you do it. This is just kind of standard way to do it. So maybe the first thing he wanted to talk about within the subtopic of arriving in Padan Aram, maybe the first thing he wants to talk about is meeting the locals at the well. You remember from Genesis 28, he met all of the local yokels at the well, and then maybe for number two, maybe he wants to talk about how he met Rachel at the well, and then maybe as he's going through his memory, he's saying, okay, and then after that, I want to talk about how I met Rachel's father, Laban, how I met him. Okay, and then the same thing with his marriage to Rachel and Leah, element 2b in our outline, the number Roman numeral 2, letter B. He could break that down into the following points: how Jacob worked for Rachel, but he married Leah. Okay, so he could break that down, but then he could break that down into further topics, and so now we're going to switch back to letters. So he could go to agreement to work for for Rachel, and then how Jacob unknowingly married Leah. Okay, so those could be points A and B under how Jacob worked for Rachel and Leah, and then point number 2 could be how Jacob married Rachel. Okay, so as you can see, the outline is a great tool. Okay, so now what we want to do is we actually, so again, as I said, we're not writing a story. We're not giving a presentation. What we're trying to do is understand the biblical narrative. And so what I'm talking about is using outlining to understand the stories of the scripture. So we're actually going to reverse engineer the process. Okay, we're going to take something that's already written, i.e. the scriptures, and we're going to read it looking for those major topics and then looking for the subtopics of each major topic. Okay, so in order to get a better understanding of a biblical story, we're gonna work backwards. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to read the story and try to look for the major, like huge, like big shifts or changes in the topic. Okay, or the subject, or the theme, or the plot, or the storyline. I'm using all these words interchangeably, whether we're talking about a topic, a theme, a subject, a plot, a storyline. We're just looking for the major shifts. So as an example, what we're going to do is we're going to look at Leviticus 17 through 18. So if you've got a Bible, let's turn on over to Leviticus 17 through 18. And I'm going to give you a practical example of how to outline, okay? And this one's pretty cool. I really, really, really like this one here. So, Leviticus 17 through 18. So what we're going to do, when you outline a portion of Scripture, you want to try to summarize that passage in the most general terms possible. Don't focus on the specifics. Sit up in a tree and get a bird's eye view of the passage. Don't try to focus in on too many specifics. You just want to start reading verses. You start reading the story, and you're going to sense that you're in a particular subject matter or topic or theme. And then you just want to keep reading as long as you're within that theme, okay? But then at some point, you're going to notice some major changes in the theme. Okay, so we're going to begin to read, and we're going to note the general theme, and then we're going to continue reading, noting how long that general theme continues. So what's the first topic of the first few verses of Leviticus 17? Well, if you look at Leviticus 17, and I'm not going to read these because for the sake of time, but what you're going to see is that he starts off talking about offerings and sacrifices. Okay, Moses starts off by talking about offerings and sacrifices. Okay, so, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons and the children of Israel, and say to them, this is the thing which the Lord commanded, saying, Whatever man of the house of Israel who kills an ox or lamb or goat in the camp, or who kills it outside the camp, and does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle of meeting to offer an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, blood guilt shall be imputed to that man. Okay, so we're talking about sacrifices. Okay, and notice how I left that topic just very general. Okay, it's about sacrifices. Okay, that's all I did. So how long are we talking about sacrifices? Well, if you read, you're going to notice that from Leviticus 17 verses 1 through 9 is all about that topic of sacrifice. On the proper way of making sacrifice. So if you go verse 9, it says, and again, if he does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle of meeting to offer it to the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his people. See, we're still talking about the same subject. It's even using the same sentence. If he does not bring it to the door of the tabernacle. Okay, so what we can say then is that, so then what we need to do is we need to think of a theme that's going to capture those first 9 verses. Okay, we need to think of a theme. And whenever you think of a theme or subject or topic that's going to characterize a number of verses, you need to make that theme or topic, you need to use as few words as possible. Okay, a theme should not take more than 4 to 7 or 4 to 8 maybe words at the most. Okay, if you have to use, more than 8, 10, or higher words, you haven't found the theme. Okay, so you want to think about a certain number of words, as few as possible, that capture the essence of what that passage is that you just read. And so if I were to do that, I would just say Leviticus 17, 1 through 9, are rules about acceptable sacrifices. Okay, and there's no one correct answer. I mean, we'll all come to we'll all use slightly different terms to summarize the theme of a passage, but we should all pretty much be in the general ballpark. Okay, and so now what we would do is, so we've got the first theme, and you see we've got Roman numeral 1. There are rules about acceptable sacrifices. And then we would continue reading. We start reading in Leviticus 17, verse 10. And so then we would just start reading. And it says, whatever man of the house of Israel, of the strangers who dwell among you, who eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood. So right away, you can tell that we did a good job in going from verses 1 through 9 as our first topic, because it was specifically honed in on sacrifices. Now we've gone to this topic of eating blood. Okay, we've gone to the topic of eating blood, and so the question is, how long? Then, so now you see you're in a new major topic. So the question is, how long is the subject going to be about blood? And so if we read, what we're going to notice is that topic goes from Leviticus 17:10 all the way through Leviticus 17:16. Okay, and so it becomes our second major theme in our outline. Okay, so again, for verses 10 through 16, we have to come up with a theme. Again, we want to make it as general as possible. I should say as general as possible, but specific as possible. And I won't say that. But again, you want just a few words that will capture the essence of those verses. And so our first major topic is rules about acceptable sacrifices. And for this third one, I'm just going to say the prohibition of eating blood. Okay, so if you read verses 10 to 16, you see that that captures that theme pretty well. Again, different people will come up with different ways of saying the same thing. Okay, all right. So next, what we want to do is we want to look at chapter 18. So we'll start reading chapter 18, and we're going to see that there is a new subject. And so when you look at it, what's the new subject for the first few verses? And basically, it begins talking about Moses begins by talking about avoiding the pagan practices and only obeying Adonai's laws. Okay, and that extends. Again, you want to find out, well, how long does he talk about these things? And so it looks like the first five verses are talking about this idea of not following pagan practices. Okay, and so that's in the first five verses. All right. So, well, on this one, we're just going to keep reading a little bit. We want to just get a bird's eye view of the whole chapter of chapter 18. So already we can see, okay, well, we're talking about, avoiding pagan practices. So what's the next thematic unit? And so if we read, what you're going to see is that from verses 6 through 23, it talks about laws against forbidden sexual unions. Okay, and what would be neat is for you guys to, if this is your first time doing this, to practice this. Once we finish this presentation, to go back and try to outline 17 and 18 yourself and see if you agree or disagree with the sections and how I divided it. I think we'll probably all come up with the same. The same divisions. Okay, so forbidden sexual unions. Okay, and now let's just keep reading because we're talking about doing all of 18. So what we see is that 24 through 30 is a second section of admonitions about avoiding pagan practices and only obeying Adonai. Okay, so in other words, what we saw is that verses 1 through 5 were talking about avoiding pagan practices. Verses 24 through 30 are also about avoiding pagan practices, right? And then in the middle, we have specific laws about avoiding particular pagan practices, which have to do with forbidden sexual unions. So it's pretty easy to see that all of chapter 18 is one thematic unit. And the way I like to look at it is it has bookends, okay? Verses 1 through 5, admonition, don't follow the ways of the heathen, walk in my ways. Okay, and then you have some subject matter, verses 6 to 23, and then the ending bookend, 24 through 30. It's the same thing as 1 through 5, it's just expanded. Okay, so we have bookends. And so what we have is a forbidden sexual union sandwich, okay, right? Where the forbidden sexual unions, verses 6 through 13, are in the middle, but then on top, verses 1 through 5 is, hey, don't do what the pagans do, do what I tell you to do. At the bottom, verses 24 through 30, hey, don't do what the pagans do, do what I tell you to do. And in the middle are the pagan things that they do. So we have a sandwich there with bookends, a beginning bookend and ending bookend. So we know that from verses 1 all the way through verse 30 is one subject. Okay, so so we say, well, what is the new subject? Again, I pretty much did this analysis here. 1 through 5 and 24 through 30 are the same thing. Verses 6 through 23 are the actual pagan practices. So what I'm going to suggest is, since we've got some bookends here, verses 1 through 5 and then 24 through 30, and the content in between, let's just look at all of Leviticus 18 as one subject, okay? And if we were to come up with one theme, I would say that Leviticus 18, 1 through 30 is prohibitions against pagan sexual practices, okay? That's how we could call that. And so here, what we could do is we could say, and this should say choose a theme. Right, all right. So if we were to choose a theme for Leviticus 18, we see again the rules about acceptable sacrifices, verses 1 through 8. Well, I'm sorry. This right here is actually a summary of Leviticus 17 through 18. So that says Leviticus 18. It should say provide an outline for Leviticus 17 through 18, because that's what we're about to do. So our outline from Leviticus 17 through 18, it covered three major topics. Remember, the first one was Leviticus 17, 1 through 9. It was rules about acceptable sacrifices. The second topic that we saw was Leviticus 17, 10 through 16. And remember, it was about the prohibition of eating blood. And now lastly, what we see here is Leviticus 18, which is the prohibitions against pagan sexual practices. Okay, so now what I want to do is I just want to give you a taste of this. I'm in the midst of a major study of the book of Revelation. And so, as I said, whenever I study the scriptures, I outline. And so I have an outline here of the entire book of Revelation. So what I did is I practice what I preach. And so when I began studying the book of Revelation, one of the things that I wanted to do was to outline the entire book of Revelation. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to rifle through some of the major topics and divisions that I saw. So, for instance, from Revelation 1 through 20. I saw that as one theme, and I called it the introduction to the book of Revelation. Okay, from chapters 2, verse 1 through chapter 3, 22, verse 22. Those are the 11. Those are the letters to the seven congregations, and I think you can I think you can already get a feel for how I'm going through and looking for major subject changes. Okay, Revelation 4:1 through 5:14 is who can open the scroll with the seven seals. And again, as I said, whenever you summarize a passage of scripture, you need to look for, maybe 4 to 8 words max. Okay, 4 to 8 words max is a good general rule. Chapter 6 is 6 1 through 17, the opening of the first 6 scrolls. Chapter 7 1 through 17 is the sealing of the 144,000 servants of God, whereas chapter 7 verses 9 through 17 is a vision of those saved from the nations. I'm going to add one word of admonition here. I'm not going to say don't pay attention to chapter divisions, but don't let the chapter divisions rule you or guide. Don't let them rule you, and don't think that chapter divisions are always correct. They're not. Okay, they're not. So here's a good example. Sometimes there could be more than one subject in a chapter, like it is in chapter 7. Okay. So let's continue here. So you can see what's going on here. Chapter 10. Now, sometimes the chapters, they are good divisions, right? Right? Okay. And as a matter of fact, right here, it seems like we're going through the chapters. Now, I see them. No, that is. There's only 8 there. Okay. So we keep going. So what I want to do is I just want to show you how I've done this. So let's look at those first. Let's look at the first 20 verses. So as I read through the first 20 verses, remember I told you can have a major division, verses chapter 1 verses 1 through 20, introduction to the book of Revelation. But then remember I said in those first 20 verses there may be some subtopics, right? And so I see 4 subtopics in Revelation 1 through 20. I see verses 1 through 8 as the greeting. And again, I'm just breaking it down into the thematic units that are there. Verses 9 through 11 was the command to record the revelation. Verses 12 through 16 were the verses which comprise John's vision of Yeshua. And then verses 17 through 20 is where John was commanded to record the revelation of Yeshua. Okay? All right, so what I did was I broke down the 20 verses into those 4 main topics. Now, because I'm a little analytical here, I am an analytical chemist, by the way, I broke this down even further. So if we look at verses 1 through 8, I broke those down into two major topics. So from verses 1 to 3 is the purpose and summary of the book. Okay? In verses 4 through 8, I summarize that theme as greetings to the 7 churches, or congregations, shall I say. It's because I won't go into that. But then I broke down verses 1 through 3 even further. And so it's verse 1 is a revelation of Yeshua to be shown to his servants. Verse 2 is John's witness to the testimony of Yeshua and the word of God. And then verse 3 is the blessings for those who hear and do the prophecy. So likewise with verses 4 through 8, I broke those down into 4 topics. And then each one of these I even broke down into another topics. Oh, well, those are actually notes. So we won't. We'll close that. So once we get past this, it's just notes that I'm adding to it. But you can see here how what we did is we went through. So I went through, and I could see. Let me reduce this here. And by the way, if you learn how to use this outlining function on Word, it's pretty neat to use. But you can see here how Revelation 1 through 20 was one major section. And within Revelation 1 through 20, the introduction to the book of Revelation, I saw 4 other subtopics, not a major topic, but 4 subtopics. And then within each one of these subtopics, I was able to then go through and break it down into other subtopics. So that's just, again, just an example of how I'm actually using this. As I said, every time I study a book of the Bible, or a subject, I try to outline it, or I try to search for chiastic structures, and that's a subject for another day. But anyway, I hope that this helped you guys. I just wanted to formalize some thoughts. Show you what outlining was about, how it can help. And again, as I said, just by going through this process, it's going to help you in a number of ways. And chiefly, it's going to get you in the Word, okay? Right? It's going to get you in the Word. It's going to get you thinking about everything that you read. As you go through the verses, you have to think, right? As you try to organize these passages into themes, it makes you think. It makes you analyze the Scripture. It makes you meditate on it, because there's some verses, or a few verses, where it's going to be difficult to come up with the theme, or you have to think, well, does the theme end here, or does it continue going? So that whole process is getting you meditating in the Word, and then once you actually figure out, once you actually outline something, you have something that you can continually go back to, that's going to continually help you understand the overall flow of a passage of Scripture. And it's going to help you interpret everything in context, because you're going to have the context that you've come up with. So I hope this helps. May Adonai bless all of you, and I hope you continue to study with Restoration of Torah Ministries. I'm looking forward to continuing. As a matter of fact, in the near future, we're going to be doing a lot on, guess what subject? The book of Revelation. I'll see you then. Shalom. Bye-bye.